it is as difficult to find a wreck as it is to leave it afterwards.
Yeah.
Because your company or your institution just come across a more interesting wreck, the information you want or will give a contribution to the human knowledge in any way. Time, effort, money, in try to find it. It is a very serious decision. Remember, you are working with underwater cultural heritage that belongs to all of us, to all humankind. So we have to be responsible towards that. Hello everyone and welcome to Underwater Adventures with Alex Mirabal. Today we will talk about why and how to abandon a shipwreck that you have found with so much effort. So let's dive into it. I decided to make this episode because many times when I talk to my friends and I talk to people in general, they ask me about how to find a shipwreck, how to identify that shipwreck is interesting, but almost nobody, and I said almost because few of my friends have asked me, okay, how is to make a decision of already leave a shipwreck? Just leave it, even if it was so difficult to find. And also, which are the factors that lead you to take such a decision? Obviously, something which shouldn't be easy. So I wanted to share this with you and talk because I have a previous episode in which is treasure hunting mistakes. It is an episode in which I say that you should not fall in love with a shipwreck. You should not fall in love with the story that will make you take decisions in the way that they are not good for you. Okay, this I can tell you right from the outset that making the decision of stop working on a shipwreck, being excavating or exploring the shipwreck, it is a very difficult decision to make. First, because you already have spent time, effort, money in try to find it. Then you find it. How many people in this world can say, I found a 350-year-old shipwreck? So when you find it, you want to take out of that shipwreck the most you can. And arriving to a moment or to a point in which you have to decide, okay, let's stop here and move to another subject, to another target, that is very difficult. And I want to share with you guys examples, good and bad, of how to do this and why. So first, let's discuss when you find a shipwreck, which are the reasons why you should stay, not leave, what you should stay in the shipwreck. Well, first, because you were looking for it and you were looking for it for a reason, because it was a very interesting ship from the 17th century, because it was transporting an interesting cargo, because it plays a role in the history of a country or a geographical area. There are plenty of reasons. But then you find the wreck and you have to analyze. We will start now, but the wrecks that you recently find, the wrecks that are new to you, and you have to assess and try to see if the wreck is worth of excavating it. Because this is the first important decision. You find a wreck, it doesn't matter how much you like it, but you find a wreck and you have to decide if it's worth excavating. And there are plenty of reasons you have to go through. Because let's be clear on this. We have the task, we maritime archaeologists, we have the task of investigating the remnants of the past, in this case in shipwrecks. So we have to figure out during the assessment of the shipwreck if it has enough material to give you information that you want. It is still possible to work on it. The geographical area, the conditions, the means you need to do that. And if you have secured the funds to do that project. Remember, I mean, this is not new to anyone. If you make a project since the very beginning, you need to make sure you have enough funds to carry on with the project.
Yeah.
It is not good for the shipwreck, it's not good for you, it's not good for human knowledge that you start working on a shipwreck and suddenly you realize that you have no more funds, that you have to stop it.
Yeah, I guess, of course, and I guess that is one of those reasons that you want to avoid the most, because it's one of them that it's going to sound counterintuitive, but you could potentially prepare more for. I know that having money is not out of nowhere, but it is one of those that as the archaeologist or as the operations manager, you might feel a little bit more in control of taking care of before arriving to the site. You know what I mean? So maybe that's like one of the first steps, and other things might happen later on that you cannot control that make you have to leave the site, but let it not be because you didn't calculate your budget or your funds enough. That's crazy.
Yeah, in the ideal world, when you start a project, you should have the funds till completion.
You should have a forecast, yes.
Well, but you have the funds secure.
Yeah.
And this is like the chicken and egg situation. You have to study and you have to assess the wreck first to realize if, or just to get enough information to make sure that it is worth researching and excavating and studying and spend the amount of money you need to do. This applies for private companies, for institutions, for universities, for everyone. I mean, you need to use money to do that. You better make it worth. I mean, you better decide over something which will give you the information you want or will give a contribution to the human knowledge in any way. So this is the first thing. You may find the wreck you were looking for, but you may find other wrecks that you were not looking for, but they are in the area because it's a dangerous area, and you have to assess which of those to work. This is very difficult. This is very difficult, and I tell you, because I have had the experience in many wrecks. There are wrecks that since day one, you can identify that it's an important or it's an interesting wreck or potentially an interesting wreck. And I have found wrecks in which you spend 6 months working, and in the 7th month, you make the first relevant find. How do you finance that? How do you convince someone that, yes, I will be 7 months in this wreck, but trust me, this will be good or this will be important. So this is your first criteria to try to decide if you stay on the wreck or you leave. Remember, if you make the decision to leave and leave the wreck undisturbed, try to leave it the most undisturbed possible. If you will not be on the wreck, don't touch it too much, because you will alter the balance, the equilibrium in which the wreck is, the chemical equilibrium in which the wreck is, and you could accelerate, you could speed up the degradation of the wreck material. So you need to be very careful in your assessment to see if the wreck was excavation, which is a second process, or if you will leave it for the time being. You register it, you know where it is, you know how it looks like, but maybe for better days or other technology that comes around and you could use that technology without disturbing too much the site. Okay, but here we have two important characters in every of these projects, which is the operation manager and the archaeologist. These are by nature two conflicting positions within the project. The operation manager will try to make the project the most efficient possible,
most lean,
the most successful in terms of return. You can read return in terms of money or in terms of knowledge or in terms of whatever you like, but this is what the operation manager is trying to do, and the archaeologist is trying to be the longest possible in a shipwreck, because to tell you the truth, no shipwreck, which I know, ever finished. They are there. You could be working in a shipwreck for 30 years. We have some examples of institutions or groups or companies that have been working in shipwrecks for 30, 35 years, and they're still finding stuff with new information. So it is very difficult. It's the most difficult decision for an operation manager or archaeologist to say, okay, we are done here, let's move to another wreck. This is almost impossible. So these two people, they are always fighting, let's say in a constructive way, but they are always fighting to make the best decisions over the shipwreck and what you are discovering every day. In my operations, I don't really have that problem because I am the operation manager and the archaeologist. So everything everything comes to me.
I was just about to say out loud, it's interesting for me to hear how the work environment has changed a lot. I know that I work in a completely different industry than yours, but already in my generation and in the positions that I had because of smaller companies and everything, we have become very highly aware of when you're doing more than one person's job. You know, when you're like, okay, this is kind of conflicting, or I'm only one person, I shouldn't be involved in these many different topics. And I found it funny that you never complained, at least to us as kids, you never complained about this reality. And now I know as your daughter, I always knew that you had both positions, but now I know as your daughter how different they are. And especially from my own experience, I could have been your ops manager because I studied business, and you could have continued being your archaeologist in a hypothetical world. It didn't happen, guys, but in a hypothetical world, and because I know you and I'm your daughter and I work with you, I know how different you are from the operations manager profile. Like if I were hiring you, now I know you have the experience, but initially I wouldn't have hired you for that position. If it were me, by the way, guys, I used to be a recruiter. That's why I'm saying all of this. I would have looked at one profile and then the other, and you would, especially in this situation, you shouldn't be the same person for the success in general of the operations. Well, but that's not how life is, and you have proven how successful you are. I know, but yeah, interesting.
Well, if you manage to get into one person, let's say, the archaeological or the ethical responsibility of how to properly work a shipwreck and respectfully and academically work a shipwreck, and at the same time, this same person has the sensitivity of that you cannot throw money away, that you have to be money conscious because otherwise your operation wouldn't continue or wouldn't exist at all. It can match. I mean, you can put all that in one person. The problem is for that one person.
That's what I mean. It's a lot. It's tough. It's a lot of responsibility.
And I have encountered feelings because I want to stay the longest possible in every wreck. But reality puts you in a different position that you have to make decisions. So I can tell you, either from the operation manager point of view or archaeologist point of view, in both cases, this is the most difficult decision to make. Okay, we have enough of the information we came to take out of this wreck, let's move. Because you don't know if
that's
meters
enough
away from the last spot of excavation, you will make a find that will change the entire perception of what you're working.
Change the entire course of European economics.
All right. Not that much, but some find that it will change 100%. Your train of thought, it will change your research, but I mean, in every area of the human knowledge, you have to do this. I mean, you have to stop at a certain point in which you say, okay, I set my objectives, I came here to do this, I think I have fulfilled them to the best of my capacity, and then let's move to another place. What happened with this? That none of the wrecks that I have finished excavating is finished. Maybe tomorrow, I mean, I keep on researching. Maybe tomorrow it comes a new technology that I think, but this will be super good to run it over that site, which I worked 25 years ago, because it may give me the information that I couldn't grab at the time. So, they are not like totally closed, but there is a moment in you will have to make a decision of leaving a wreck, being prior to excavation so you don't disturb the site too much, or during excavation so you don't spend so much money. Now I will tell you the main reasons why people take this decision, and which are reasonable and which are to be taken with a little bit of skepticism. First, the scarcity of artifacts. This is during an excavation. You are excavating. By now, watching the videos, you might know that the artifacts and the wreck material is not spread homogeneously on the seabed. There are certain spots where you have more concentration of wrecked material, being artifacts or part of the ship. So it could happen during your excavation that you hit a place in which you recover a lot of artifacts per day. Every dive you recover artifacts, every time is very exciting and you are getting a lot of new information in every dive. But then it comes 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe a couple of months in which you arrive to an area where you are not finding anything. This is, I would say, the main reason why most of the operators stopped working in a shipwreck. We made that mistake in our first shipwreck in Cuba, in Carizú, with the Nuestra Señora de las Mercedes. I have made a couple of episodes about it because it was my first wreck and it was the first wreck of the company Carizú. And we worked there for probably 3 years or 3 seasons or a couple of seasons, and we employ all new equipment and new tools. And there was a point in which we all decide, at that time we were not that organized that you will have an operation manager, an archaeologist and everything. Everyone was like giving their opinion in the team. And we said, okay, we think we have recovered everything from the wreck. No new find will give us better information. Remember, by that moment, we have already identified that was the Nuestra Señora de las Mercedes, what was the story of the ship. So it seemed that there were very little to find after a couple of years. Well, okay, we closed the wreck, we moved to Fuxa, which was recently found, and we start all the investigation in Fuxa. Yeah, all super cool. Like 5 years after that, because Carizú was a government company, but the Cuban government created another company to do the same, and obviously they didn't want to go exploring to find a shipwreck. They say, let's go to the shipwreck that this guy already found. I mean, it's there, it's easy. So they went there and they recovered probably more than we did. They found a different area, there was full of artifacts and information about that shipwreck that we just missed. So it was, in the beginning, was really upsetting. We were all angry that they were doing that. But at the end, in the benefit of human knowledge, they did the right thing.
Totally.
They went there and they uncovered our mistake, our rush. And this is something that if you are running expeditions for shipwrecks, you will face always. There will be pressures from your institution, your company, your university, that funds are running out. You better have a good reason to stay on that site longer. It is very costly. And you have, as operation manager or archaeologist, to decide in the best of your capacity what is the best thing to do. Okay, I'm just mentioning this because I want everyone to understand that it is as difficult to find a wreck as it is to leave it afterwards.
Yeah.
Because you already know it's there. You already know how can potentially important could be. So it is a really hard decision to make, but there is a point in which you have to make it. The scarcity of artifacts, as I mentioned, is not the best reason to leave the wreck. You have to analyze the scattering pattern of wreck material and make sure you are not missing anything. You are not leaving any areas without investigation. That doesn't mean that you will have to be there forever, but you have to make that sure. The second one is that your team or your company or your institution just come across a more interesting wreck. That is the second wrong reason. Because you come across another wreck and said, cool, this one is more interesting because in this one we have been working for another 2 or 3 years. So this one is just like virgin.
Yeah.
Let's go there and abandon this one. Okay, that's irresponsible. You should not do that ever. Every shipwreck has a story to tell. and you need to try to get out of that story the most you can. Yes, this moment will arrive in which you have to move, but make sure you don't do it by these two reasons I have mentioned: the scarcity of finds and the finding of a new and more exciting one. The third would be the pressure from your company or from your institution. They will press you. They will tell you, okay, you're wasting your time, you're wasting our funds in that place because you haven't found anything in the last 3 days. As strict as that could get, in the last 3 days, you haven't found anything new. So you better move. Okay, again, it is up to you as operation manager or archaeologist or both to make the right decision and to assess or to predict if there is still 2, 3, 4 months to go for you to take everything out of the wreck.
And if possible, to argue back the reality or the availability of doing that, of being like, oh, I cannot produce results in 3 days. That would be irresponsible to request out of anyone doing academic work. So yeah, that's where the archaeologist or the ops manager or both should try to assess whether they should push back a little bit or not, if they can.
Yeah, exactly. But you see, if you are in a position in any moment in which your headquarters, your company or institution or university, it pushes you so hard that say that you have to find something or have to make it viable in 2 or 3 days, then you are with the wrong group.
Yeah.
This is not the way it works. You have to, the operation manager and the archaeologist, they both have to find the way of understanding if you have to stay there a little bit longer or if it's healthy to stop it right here, park it. You don't close the wreck, you don't just discard it. You have to make sure it's parked until conditions are different, until the new technology comes around, until there are other situations in which you can go back to the wreck with newly added means. In general, being technology, being knowledge, being, for instance, it has happened to me that I have worked in a shipwreck and moved from that shipwreck to another one. And 30 years later, my experience, my own experience, no new technology or anything, it would tell me, I would love to go back to that shipwreck with what I know now. Yeah. And this is valid. This is a way of researching.
And also, whenever all the other pressures are eliminated, exactly as you said, on one point, it could be money or it could be timing or it could be literally anything else. If that limitation goes out the window or is not a worry anymore, it could be a new space to reconsider going back to an abandoned shipwreck.
There we go. That's why I didn't, when we started talking about making this episode, I didn't want to use the word abandon because we don't really abandon the sites. We left them in peace for a while till, I have plenty of examples. I have made a couple of episodes of artifacts which we recover and I didn't know what they were, and 20 years later I came up with the answer or I found the answer. Well, with shipwrecks happened the same. Have in mind, because you will be faced to make this decision at a certain point in your life, have in mind it's not necessarily definitive. You can move out from a wreck and pursue a new target or a new project without leaving that wreck for good. You have it. You have your records, you have everything written down, you can go back to it any moment you can. I wouldn't say you like, because I like to go back to plenty of wrecks and I haven't been able to. But have in mind that this is the most difficult decision for an operation manager or archaeologist and should not be taken under pressure and should not be taken lightly. It is a very serious decision. Remember, you are working with underwater cultural heritage that belongs to all of us, to all humankind. So we have to be responsible towards that. If you have, because there are like the typical enemies approach, you have the treasure hunting approach or the archaeologist approach, which for me is both of of them as nonsense, because the research, the investigation is just one. Everyone pursue the same objective. But if you're a treasure hunter and you go there and say, okay, there are no more coins, I move. Wow. And if you are an archaeologist, you can say, I will stay forever because there's still maybe a nail that we haven't found and it's 3 miles away. So both approaches in these extremes I'm talking, both approaches are incorrect. You have to really get the wreck as a whole, as a context, as a whole, as a context that could give you the return you want from it. And the main thing you have to identify is which is your objective when excavating or disturbing a wreck site. When you have that very clear, I mean, it could fall in any of the things that I have mentioned. When you have that very clear, then you can make a decision based on that. But never make it under pressure. Remember, it's a very difficult decision. It's a responsibility we have. And also the lack of funds, even if it's not the best decision in the world, it can force you to make that decision because you spend too much time in one side, funds run out, and you cannot continue. That also happens. So I wanted to share this with you. It's not, let's say, like the most intriguing or exciting episode, but I'm sure that many of you are asking yourselves how these guys find a wreck that for anybody would be like a find of a lifetime, and after 3 years they simply move and go to another one. Well, I hope that during the video I managed to explain the reasons more or less how to do it, and this feeling that you don't want to leave. You don't want to simply move from one wreck to another, but the same attachment I have to this wreck, it is in the same level of the curiosity I have to get to the new one. So you really have to be responsible in the moment of making that decision. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Share it with your friends if you find it interesting. Leave it a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's keep on diving.